The F15 XXL from Skymaster Jets is upside down right now. There's a good reason for it. Let's dive back in to video number 2 in the assembly process. Short recap on last video. We just got our gear serviced and all taken care of. So front gear is done. And we got our main gears taken care of as well too. And we also got our fuel tanks sorted out. So that part's done. Now before we do anything with the main fuselage and putting that gear back in, we need to service all of our air cylinders. That's going to be a critical thing. So I'll show you guys how to do that. We of course have 3 air cylinders on each main, and we've got 1 air cylinder on the nose door. So I'll probably show you on the nose door because it's the easiest to access. So let's pull this guy out and I'll show you what we do. All right, so first thing we want to do is cut our air lines. Just to get those guys off. Sorry, not cut our air lines, cut the zip ties holding our air lines. Okay, so that part's good. And then we want to undo our air cylinders and get them out of the plane. Now sometimes you don't necessarily need to do that, but it's kind of the easiest way to deal with stuff. So I'm going to pull this out and get this out. So in this case, like for example, we may be able to undo this side of the air cylinder here and just pull it out and be able to work on it while it's out of the plane. So we'll do that first. I'll undo this side, see if we can get it out through the door opening, and then we may be able to work on it without pulling off that side, but it's easy enough just to pull it all off. All right, so we got our air cylinder out here, and this is a couple of the things we're looking for. Basically, Skymaster's gotten really good at this. So they have started putting red Loctite or high sol aero epoxy on the nipples, which is good. So they never used to do that actually. So you'd be able to just take these nipples and unthread them. So that was a huge problem. So those are generally okay now. We're just checking to make sure that there is Loctite on there, which is good. But the other thing we're going to do is pull these cylinders apart. Now I have found recently that they are pre-lubricating the air cylinders, or at least the ones that I've checked out recently. So we will see. The other thing I like to do anyways, I'll just cut these off so it's done, but I like to cut the airline off, and then we'll start with a fresh cut and a fresh press on. So I'll leave those on there so we can see them, but that's basically what we're doing when we're pulling this apart. So we're going to clean it up, make sure all the crud's out of there. So we're a little bit dirty inside there, a little bit of dust and crap. And then we want to pull the other side of the air cylinder off as well too. So the last one that I did, I think was the F4, and that one had a bunch of lubricant all over the cylinders. This one has a bit as well too, so that's good. But we'll put a little bit of thin silicone oil when we put these guys back together. So we'll just clean all the crud off. Make sure everything's clean. So looking down the cylinder, we're nice and clean, which is good. Everything's good there. So now we take a little bit of silicone shock oil. The weight doesn't really matter. That's not important, at least I find. I'll put a couple drops in there. And what that does, so we're going to do that on both sides of the cylinder, but what that does is that floats around in there, keeps the O-rings nice and lubricated, and then we'll put a little bit on the O-ring sealing that guy up. Now there is such a thing as Parker O-Lube, which is silicone grease. You can use that as well too. I like the thin silicone lube because it's moving around is the reason I like it. So nice and smooth now, which is good. And then on the other side here, we'll put 2 drops of oil in there. And then maybe that'll show up, but it's a good amount just floating around in that cylinder. And again, we'll put just a little bit on our O-ring so it helps seal it up. And there we go. So that cylinder is essentially serviced, ready to go. moving nice and smoothly. And the other thing you can do if you want is you could pressurize these cylinders and leave them pressurized for a little bit and make sure that they hold air. We can do that, but I find that doing this quick little service is pretty much the key to making it work perfectly. And when we do get the mains done, those all come to one line. So what we can do, well, the two main ones and then the back one's separate, but we can pressurize each side of those two mains and leave them pressurized for a while and confirm that they hold air. Once we get this guy back in the front fuselage, we can do the same thing while we work on the back doors on the main body. I find it's nice to have these guys installed, so then it's, you know, all the sideways forces and everything are done and they're in the fuselage where they're going to be, versus having them sitting out neutral, no forces or anything on them. All right, and the last thing I'll show you here is how to get the airline off, and this kind of works for fuel line, airline, all that type of stuff. These are my Klein precision flush cutters. I try and keep these guys on hand, fresh pair if possible, so usually I'll buy two. But these are great side cutters. They're nice because they're heat treated as well too, so this is an electrical tool. So when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you never take an X-Acto knife and cut the tubing, because you're going to put a slice on the barb, and that is not a good thing, so that will cause leaks. So you want to take these tubes, same thing with fuel tubes, give it a squish like that, and basically it'll come off. So now the barbs are intact, there's no slice or anything on the barbs, and then we'll take the tube with the new cut end, so nice and tight and everything, and slide that over top. So that is a good, freshly serviced cylinder, all ready to go back in the plane. All right, so front door is back in. So how do we test these doors? Well, I'll show you guys that as well. So I take my air pump here, and it's got a ball adapter on it. And we put that on the end of the adapter, and we can now fill this up to 100 PSI, which would be kind of the norm max pressure. And we don't want to just leave the pump hooked up because it's going to leak through the pump. So then what we do is we take that, pinch it off, disconnect it, like that, and we leave it. And we can leave it for an hour or two. And right now everything's pressurized on the open side of things. So like this, it's got lots of force on it. I really have to push if I want to compress that cylinder. But obviously right now everything's pressurized, it's open. We're checking the open or green side of the cylinder. So we'll leave that for a while we're working on the mains over there, and we'll come back and double check this. So that's a great way to pressurize and check your cylinders after servicing them. And that definitely qualifies as a tip time, and this tip time has been brought to you by Trusty, the original Trusty bent screwdriver. So it's been a couple hours now since we filled this air cylinder up with air, and we're still holding pressure. So that's awesome. While we work on the rest of the main doors, we are going to fill up the yellow valve. We'll open this guy up. Beautiful. And there's not a lot of air in there, so if it has a small leak, it's going to show up very quickly. So now we'll do the same thing to the yellow side, which is the closed side, and we'll leave that sit for a couple hours as well. So we're chasing a little bit of a leak on the main, I'll call them the main gear doors, on the upside. So I put some pressure in here, and it's just slowly going down like 1 or 2 PSI every minute. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go through the yellow system on the main doors and see if we can figure out where that is. So what I do for this is I just take some soap and water. So this is dish detergent and water, and we will spray some in a container. And then now what I do is I take Trusty bent screwdriver, and we start just going through these lines. So I just take Trusty and put a little bit of soapy water on each of the joints. And if we have a leak, let's see usually pretty obvious. You can see it. So I'm going to work my way through this stuff. So our T is good. Now we have to go to each of these cylinders and check those as well. All right, so we got our main cylinders licked here. What actually was happening was there was some air movement across the cylinders. So when I filled up the yellow side of the cylinder, I checked everything for leaks, all the joints and everything were all good. And then I took the green line, which essentially when the yellow is pressurized, the green doesn't have anything going on there, and there was air coming out of the green line. So what that means is that air was getting across the cylinders. So what I did was I took all the cylinders apart again and I used Parker Super O-Lube. Now this is thicker, like silicone grease is what it is, and works better on those O-rings when you need to actually take up a little bit of space. So anyways, that's what I used. We're pumped up here to 100 PSI exactly. Nothing's moving and there's no air coming out of this side, the green side. So cylinders are good. All right, so tank mounting is also sorted out here. Now I did get a reply back from SkyMaster, and basically that piece should have actually been installed right here where this piece is. So probably could have gotten away with just having the one mount if we would have done it the flipped around way, but I'm actually happy with this. This gives the tank even better support. So I just made another piece of really thin aircraft ply that just goes in there. That's epoxied all the way around. And then now to take the tank out, we're gonna undo those bolts on the top side of the fuselage. There's maybe a better shot right there. So undo these guys. When the gear is in place here, the gear is going to be covering it so we can reach in through the top side and get those guys undone. But we're going to pull these tanks out now. We're going to mark them, but we'll be able to put them back in later once we get our bungs fit. But at least right now the tanks are 100% fit and good to go. All right, and as we start to get into possibly installing our servos, we want to start getting our servos cycled. We're going to get all of the servos burnt in here. This is something we do with all of our servos here at the shop that go in aircraft. We do a burn-in process or a servo cycling process. So we'll take the new servo out. We use a jetty box for this purpose. Now the jetty box is not specifically for this, but it's one of the features that the jetty box does. And basically what we do is we put these servos through 990 cycles. The reason we do this is generally with electronic devices, if you're gonna have a problem with them, it usually happens in the beginning part of their life. So we wanna get these servos operating, moving. So we put them through 990 cycles because that is the maximum number that the jetty box does, and takes about 15 minutes per servo. And we have had in the past, some servos have issues, never any MKS, but some other brands. Now, one of the common questions is, isn't this reducing the life of a servo? No, I think during a regular flight, the servo is moving tons more than 990 cycles. So anyways, we go impulse generator, no, servo cycle, yes. Number of cycles, we just go right to the max, which is 990. We hit OK, the servo starts moving. We change the position with the up arrow to 500. That's the maximum spacing that the servo will move. And then I usually put the speed, which is the V, the velocity, at 30. Now that servo is doing its thing. It basically goes for the entire cycle. When it's done, it just says it's done. All right, so with everything sorted out with the main gear doors and the tank mounting and everything, it is time to put our gear back in. So one thing we want to do with this gear before we put it back in is we want to put a couple drops of silicone lubricant in each side of the main cylinder here, the actuation cylinder. So to do this, exactly the same thing as we do on the air cylinders. Basically, as we move this, you'll see, so right now the piston is here. As we lift this whole assembly this direction, the piston's moving this way in the cylinder, which is going to cause a suction effect on the blue side right there. So I'll just hold my dropper up, and as I move this, I'm putting a few drops of silicone lubricant in this side. As we move it the other way, it'll do the same thing on the red side. All right, so we got our gear back in. We've transferred the F15 onto a hood stand here so we can drop the gear. So getting the blue and red lines hooked back up is pretty straightforward. Just make sure I clean those nipples off before I put the line back on to make sure we get rid of any lubricant that's on the nipples. For the brake line, we've just left those loose, and I want to drop the gear to figure out the best route to get those guys reinstalled. Of course, we use Loctite on those bolts. Getting them in is pretty straightforward. You got good access here, and then through the back, you've got pretty good access if you have long arms. I actually can reach through the engine hatches and reach down to the 3 bolts there. So I'm going to get our lines reattached, our blue and red line, and then we will drop the gear and figure out our routing for the brakes. All right, so fuselage is flipped back over again, and we are routing our brake lines. So the way I've decided to route the brake lines here is we're coming through the main pivot, and I'm going to be adding 1, 2, 3, 4 keepers. So same idea that we used on the front gear. So these are things that I print with my 3D printer, and they're just basically through fittings with they're little circle fittings, I guess, tubes with a little flat side. So this is the airline size that I use. So all I do for this is I just take my Dremel and we just put a little mark, just basically a little grind mark, and that gives good contact for the glue or the CA to adhere to the leg. So we're going to get those 4 installed, and then we're going to get our brake line run to each hub. So both gear are done, the lines are all run and everything, so those worked out great. And as far as what it looks like when they retract, just like that. So mains are done. Now it's time to put the nose gear back in the nose section. So this is sort of the same way. Obviously we have our servo done up here. I'm going to do our spiral on our servo line first. We've got our wires already run here for the lights, and just putting that back the way it needs to go back in, using of course all of our fasteners and Loctite. So front gear's back installed. As I mentioned previously, we have to do a little bit of cutting here on the side of the fuselage. So it's very, very close with that wheel centered now. We're almost hitting the side of the fuselage. So pretty easy solution for this. So when the gear retracts, if we add a little bit of left steering, what that's going to do is creates more space there. So if we add just a couple points of left steering, the wheel sits in there nicely, door closes nicely, and we don't have the risk of contacting the side of the fuselage. So we'll do that later on with a mix in the radio, but even now with that leg straight, it still works on the front door. All right, so moving on to the tanks next. The tank hardware for the main tanks is pretty straightforward. I've already installed the back portion here, and the front portion, basically these guys get attached to the tank like this, and this gets mounted on the 2 rails that sit underneath the tank. So we can get this piece essentially glued in place, and then these guys would screw into that piece. So first thing I've done here is the rear mount. So I just had the tank sitting in here and got this piece kind of centered up and down, side to side. And this is screwed into the fuselage now with blind nuts. The blind nuts were mounted to the mount, took them out, re-drilled the holes, and now the main support here is screwed in with blind nuts, so it is removable if needed. And then these tabs will get glued on to the back of the tank. So I'm going to get the tanks put in here, get those areas marked out on the back of the tanks if possible, so we can sand the back of the tanks in preparation for this to get glued in place. All right, so main tanks are in place. We've got it kind of jammed in place there with this foam and the tape holding it all together till our epoxy cures. So pretty straightforward. The back tabs are glued to the back of the tank, so that's all set in place. The front tabs are glued to the tank and screwed to this lower plate here. So we're gonna move away from those tanks now, leave them be, and we're gonna probably start with the back end of the aircraft. So just spent quite a bit of time kind of planning things out and going over the layout of stuff I'll give you guys some basic rundowns of what I'm thinking about here. So first of all, this main center body section, thinking about putting a couple trays in there, and that's where probably our air system is going to go, and our primary control system is going to go down there. That's also nice and centralized, so it's pretty close to all the main stuff that's going to be working on the aircraft. We may mount I'm going to put our UATs right here, so nice and close to the main tanks. The pathway for this fuel system is the saddles are going to pull first. They're going to pull into each of the main tanks, and then the main tank's going to pull down. So that's the plan for the fuel system. We could also get into mounting some equipment here, making another tray on top of the tanks, but it's really not necessary. This whole area is going to be covered when the plane's together. So whether the equipment's mounted here or down there, we have good access either way. So I don't think that's going to be a problem with that. So pretty much all of our electronics equipment's going to be mounted there. Probably just for space with the turbines here, we'll probably have our primary hubs will be mounted in this area just so our cable's long enough to get to the turbines. And looking at the nose section, what I'm thinking about here is sort of a battery box coming out like this, where we slide our batteries into. This is going to be full of a plate here, sort of like the SU, and then our batteries just come up and plug in to the 4 ports. We can have all of our other stuff, our running equipment in this area as well. So basically using the airplane, flying the airplane, nose cone comes off, everything's done from the nose, nothing's done from the back of the aircraft. I think just for weight, I'm going to put our compressor in the nose like this, and our 2 air tanks right here that we're going to use, and all of our air equipment will be sitting right back here in the main fuselage. So everything's going to be pretty close as well. So for now, I think that's our layout. The other thing with this aircraft is none of the cockpit stuff is done, but there is lots of room in this plane, sort of like the SU as well too, where you've got lots of position room and movement with the cockpit. So it'll be fairly simple to make mounts for this, and we'll just have mounts that tie into the fuselage and are removable as well. So I think we got a good plan in place. The next thing we're moving on to now that we've got a plan on where everything's going, is going to be the tail section. We're going to start running everything forward. So the key to figuring out where all that stuff was going is when we start putting servos in, we need to know where we're running our servo leads to. So for the back section here, those servo leads, well, for everything, those servo leads will be run to this area right there. We won't do any of our tray stuff yet. That gives me time to think about it. So we're going to start working on our back section and running things forward, probably starting off with our servos so we can get those lines run, and then moving into our turkey feathers, pipes, afterburner lights, turbine mounting. All right, so tail cones are painted black in preparation for the afterburner light. So the afterburner light is the biggest one that Unilite makes, and it's essentially going to mount just outside of the pipe where it comes through the turkey feathers there. And usually the lights from Unilite will come with these diffusers. Now I generally don't use them. So in a scenario where this was inset more in the turkey feathers, I wouldn't use this, but because this is so close to the outside, we're going to use the diffuser. And the diffuser actually is amazing. It glows very, very bright. Fits well over top of the LED lights. So it's going to be a great setup on this aircraft. So we will end up using that. So moving into the vertical stab servos, they mount obviously here. And I'll show you the hardware that we're going to use for this. Now this is the same setup that's used on the SU-30 from Skymaster. So this is the hardware for the rudder surface. So essentially what happens is this gets mounted in the rudder. So this pin here locks in to the rudder surface itself. This shaft comes down through the bottom of the vertical stab surface, and this arm gets mounted to this shaft. Now there is a pin, little threaded pin with a flat area. That gets mounted to a servo horn as an example. And when this surface is put together, these two pieces mate together like this. And when the servo arm turns, this arm also turns with it. So it's a nice quick release system that works very well. Just takes a bit of time to get it all set up properly. Now, as far as dimensions go, that's the key with this. So if we look at this carbon shaft here, our output shaft is, we'll just go with rudimentary math here, 2 fingers plus a little bit to the center of that shaft. This is all just for optics right now, just to see where things are at. So here's that shaft. If we go 2 fingers back plus a little bit, the center of the shaft coming down from the vertical stab is skewed towards the rear of that opening. So our servo output shaft is going to be towards the rear of the servo opening, and the servo arm and the arm coming from the vertical stab are going to be pointing forward. And that's going to ensure that everything mates up properly and turns like this. So that gives us an idea of how our servo is going to get mounted in there. Now, when we're doing our servo mounts in an area like this, we want to make sure that we bundle our servo cable up in this area. So if the servo ever needs to get changed, we pull the servo out and we can undo our clips and everything for this and also the horizontal stab surface, which is there. And then when we do that, we're going to put it in snakeskin and run it all the way forward in a good path to this area. All right, so we'll pull our rudder surface off first. And this is a nice setup because it's just a big pin through the top. And that gives us access to our rudder. Well, that's interesting. There's nothing for that to operate properly. So I'm going to pull the other one apart too to check it out, but this is basically the piece that needs to go in here. Now, this is removable, so we'll probably end up doing that after, but I was expecting there to be a shaft or a receiver portion in the actual surface, which would have been nice, but that's not done. So we'll check out the other one and see if that's got it. I'm going to try inserting this first and make sure it actually fits, which it does. Okay, so hold that thought. We'll pull our other one apart and see if it's got the hole done up in there. I just need a guide, would be nice. All right, so the other one does not have a guide, so we will need to make our channel here, which kind of sucks a little bit, but that's the way it goes. Yeah, so I need to do some figuring on this. I'll explain the solution I come up with to you guys. All right, so initially I thought that we were going to be flipping this thing around the other way, but it doesn't work out the other way. So this is actually the better way to have everything mounted, just with positioning and stuff. So it's going to be a bit interesting because we're going to need to make our own notch outs here in the vertical stab. Going to need to make our receiver portion in the rudder surface. But it looks like, as far as spacing goes, the furthest out point on the blue servo arm with that shaft extended will line up perfectly with the receiver portion. So I think that is going to be our solution, just like that. So with that in place now, we can pull the rudder back off and we can start seeing about getting our pin meshing with the rudder surface. All right, my Dremel battery just died, and it died perfect time. So there's actually a receiver portion in there. SkyMaster just never opened it up. So the hole you see in there right now, there's actually fiberglass on the top, fiberglass on the bottom, and that is exactly where we need that to be. So perfect. If my Dremel would have been more charged, it actually I would have continued to grind out more material than needed. So yes. All right, so this is the layout here with the shaft installed. So obviously this isn't going together properly right now, but this just gives us an idea of how things are looking. So that is going to work out beautiful. And what we need to do on the vertical stab side here is basically do a cutout in this area because the shaft is going to sit just like that, and it needs to have some area to operate, so that's good. Our carbon inside there, the receiver tube, is down a little bit from the part that we can see right there, so there is room to sand that out. All right, guys, so we got everything sorted out here for the rudder. It actually ended up being not so bad at all. So our hole we already talked about a little bit, but got the hole done up there for the receiver portion. I had to shorten the metal rod here by about 1 inch because it's now stopping right here. Previously it was going down further than the rod. So we've got our rod installed, and the last thing we had to do here was take out some material in that area right there so the rod can sit down lower and has enough space to turn. With this setup, we just had it all assembled and was just checking to make sure everything works. We get a ton of throw on these rudder surfaces, so that's perfect. So now what I'm doing is taking this all apart. We're gonna Loctite the rod in. We've added a flat spot to this rod, and once that's Loctited, that'll be good. And then we can put our rudder in, get this guy attached. We also did a little trial fit here on the servo, and everything meshes just perfectly. So this is the orientation that works well. So servo shaft forward, arm backwards, using the stock SkyMaster servo arms, and everything looks perfect. All right, guys, I feel like we're making some good progress on the back end here. While we're back here, we also have to get our taileron or elevator servos sorted out. So this is a very typical setup for SkyMaster. Now these servos, this is the rudder servo. I just have this in here for spacing and everything. So the channel that this fits in is about 22 millimeters long. So if we measure from the base of the output shaft, we've got 40 millimeters to here and 62 millimeters to kind of the end of that hole right by my thumb. So we're gonna put our bearing system in the innermost hole on one of these servo arms. So we're using the 599 servo in the tail. So the way this works out is you've got one of these servo arms. You have to do an angular opening at the back of the servo arm. And this is the shaft that comes through the back of the servo arm. So you can see why you need an angular hole. Comes out the front like that, and then bearings and washers get added to the output shaft. So as this moves up and down, it's sitting inside this receiver that's sitting in the horizontal stab, and this is moving up and down like this with the bearings in the center here. So this SkyMaster setup is fantastic. We've had tons of experience with this setup on F-18, F-14, Su-30s, lots of different planes use this setup. Su-30s maybe not. But anyways, very common SkyMaster setup, and there's some important considerations that I'll share with you guys as we work our way through this, and some very key important steps for longevity. So now we've got our servo spacing set up for the tail section. Now it's time to work on our servo installation. So we've cut our power box wire here. We've got 4 leads for the servos back here. I cut 2 leads for the flap servo, which mounts right in this area. And the path that our wire is going to take is it's coming forward along the edge of the fuselage. It's going to cut over to the center of the fuselage. There's a former right here. And then it's going to go under the tanks in the channel where all the airlines are run currently underneath those tanks. We've lengthened our wire, or have enough length to come right to the front of this section. So when we do our servo ends, we can cut them down if needed, or our plug-in ends, cut them down as needed, and get them spaced out properly. And as we put our servos in the tail section here, we want to bundle our wires up like this. So if we ever need to change these servos, you pull the servo out, you've got access to the plug right here, and that's a nice simple solution for this setup. As we're back here, we've also added our plug for our lights on both of the vertical stabs. The kit comes with very long wires that reach all the way to the front of the aircraft. So we've got those installed. There's one on the left and one on the right, and those are just CA'd in place. All right, you guys may have picked up on this. I just noticed this because I was gonna put the vertical stab on the aircraft, and we've got the servo all fastened down now. And I was looking at the vertical stab, I'm like, oh, that's the wrong side. So you may have noticed in the previous clips, you may not have noticed, but anyways, this vertical stab that we got ready here actually belongs on the other side. So not that it really matters because it's all mounted the same way. They both have lights and everything, so that's totally fine. So this vertical here, we're gonna get ready just like that one. And if you missed the live last night, we were going over the progress with the F15, so I encourage you guys to check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. The After Dark is our live channel, so it's a completely separate channel. Two important things with the live channel. Number one, it's fun, and if you're on the live, you can ask us questions. We see the questions, we can interact with each other. It's pretty cool. We usually have a ton of good guests here, and it's just a blast. It's usually every second Saturday in the evenings for about an hour. So tons of fun, encourage you to check it out. The other thing with the After Dark is if we do giveaways here on the channel, the winners are announced on the live on the After Dark. So it's important that if you are entering for something on this channel, that's where the winner is going to be announced. All right, verticals are installed. That's the end of video number 2, which is kind of video number 3 if we include the first one, but we'll call it video 2. That's the end of video number 2. Awesome plane so far. Very happy with everything. We're going to be, as we get into the wings, things are going to be a little bit new, but all of this stuff is things that we've dealt with before on previous Skymaster planes, so everything's going together very well. We're going to start the next video continuing with the tail, so horizontal stabs, afterburner lights, things like that, and working our way forward. So tons of fun stuff coming up. Thanks guys for tuning in to this amazing, huge F15 XXL from Skymaster Jets. Thanks for supporting the channel, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm very excited to see everybody at Turbines and Tumbleweeds in Sweetwater, Texas, October 2nd to October 5th, 2025. See you there.